This is a very interesting time because, again, the world has never seen such a mass movement of women being utterly destroyed and obliterated. There is a silent warfare going on against femininity, being done by exploiting it and telling women that every aspect of coherence and objective reality is unredeemable corruption, and that they are heroes as a result of doing degeneracy and being degenerate, being pathetic, and hating competent men. By the year 2030, 50% of women will be single and childless, a record high number for women since the beginning of time. It's never have we seen 50% of women being single and childless before, and that's just 5 years away given current trends. Not enough people are talking about this war on femininity. And even though the destroyed, wrecked psyches that can't stand what I'm doing here because I'm talking about truth in coherent ways using logic, reason, rationality, and coherent authority, I am actually serving women by speaking the truth and exposing this evil that's destroying them. Guys, I'm very happy to report that it seems as though I was right when it comes to the alleged conflict between Trump's base and Elon Musk, because Trump has just come out and said he fully agrees with Elon's position. And some people on the right have started to catch up and realize, wait a second, we were never against legal immigration. We were all against illegal immigration. So my hypothesis is held true. Go check out my last video where I explain exactly why the left is so terrified of a union between Elon Musk and what he symbolizes and has symbolized in the past. Last night I was thinking about how it's become impossible to ignore how we're living in a time where men are the most impressive and heroic they've ever been in society before. Maybe because the stakes have never been higher, where we could end civilization if the wrong people get in charge, or just because there's so much evil in the world emanating from a record number of weak, pathetic, deformed people who aren't just driven by like a tyrannical urge to control the world like villains have throughout most of history when we read about great battles, but instead are driven by a resentment for reality. So we're living in a very heroic age where we have men like Elon Musk, Andrew Tate, Trump, Charlie Kirk. Take your pick of person who is, through their sheer fearlessness, destroyed left-wing plots to destroy civilization and emasculate men, form a one-world government, etc. There's many other people I could name. Jordan Peterson, the list goes on. Simultaneously, however, to this fact of heroic men leading the charge against the forces of darkness, is the degeneracy of women to a level that also has never been witnessed before. And it's very odd that these two things should coincide, and makes me reflect heavily and for a long time. Last night I was playing like 15 games of chess and I couldn't stop thinking about why this would happen. Inevitably, you're brought to the circumstances before this heroic age emerged where men were standing against the left at record highs and when women were feminine. And you ask yourself, how did we go from that idyllic stage where everything was working properly, the 60s, the 70s, across races even, men were men and women were women, and we were doing great things for the world, going to the moon, the list goes on, to a stage where men are searching desperately for the truth, discovering red pill, educating themselves to a record high extent on the internet, finding men like Jordan Peterson, idealizing men like Elon Musk, learning from men like Andrew Tate, striving to become rich at a level that's never been seen before. And of course, there are a record also high number of lazy men who aren't trying, but those men are irrelevant. In the same way, I'm going to explain the degenerate women are irrelevant because they're not going to procreate. They're not important for the story that will be told when we look back on this century and say, wow, there are so many heroes that emerge. They never talk about the average losers. So I was asking myself as I was playing chess, why did this happen? I think we got to a place, a stage in human civilization where everything was looking up to such a high extent. We had conquered nature in some sense. We were no longer fighting off disease, and not only had we held back the attacks from nature, but we were transcending everything with our technology. And I think it was then that the forces of darkness, in their resentment, which they have held since the beginning of time, since the days of Cain and Abel, realized it's now or never, it's do or die. This references the narrative that I talked about in the Elon Musk Trump video, because it's important to understand where we are. We're at a precipice, a reflection point, just like we were in the late 60s, where we could do anything, where we weren't held back by incoherent, deliberately degraded ideologies designed to destroy humanity and hold it back and pervert it. The cycle in the late 60s came up like this. Then we had anti-reality ultimate resentment taking the form of, I think, hippies and sort of a disdain for order, disdain for the previous generation, which had, of course, saved the world against tyranny. and there was a decline into degeneracy throughout the computer era, which of course now we see animates the censorship online and has created a society that is ultimately degenerate to a level of degeneracy that the planet has never seen, that humanity has never seen, from OnlyFans to denying reality to many things that you see just daily on X, which by the way is extremely disconnected from the mainstream loser like it's crazy the mainstream loser narratives that they're trying to propagate on people. Look at this type of stuff that they're trying to convince people of. CNN is literally running segments saying Biden has never been sharper. People are saying this is straight out of North Korea, where they just expect people to believe it's full on propaganda. This is the type of thing where it's just an insult to people's intelligence and the full admission that they expect the adherents to the left to be mental slaves. It's like, yeah, you're supposed to nod along as they say Biden has never been sharper. You know what I mean? But with X, we have the ability to see the degeneracy that they've attempted to propagate against society. Now, the reason why women are experiencing record high levels of degeneracy as men are thriving and succeeding and transcending reality in such an impressive way, it directly fits every hero archetype from every story and movie told ever. The reason for this is because that same degeneracy that emerged after the 60s and was just transcended by Trump's election is deeply feminine in its nature. And I haven't really heard anyone talk about this. I've talked about, obviously, how Marxism is uniquely feminine, but this anti-order, anti-reality resentment that is unabashedly incoherent in every way and voices itself as unabashedly incoherent now is uniquely feminine because they're not trying to hide the fact that they don't make sense. They're just saying stuff like this. They're just admitting that women being degenerate is good, like making OnlyFans is good. Our society is being told to lie. Part of our society, of course, is being told to lie. Many of us have rejected that. The majority has now rejected that. But the left is now openly admitting that they're totally corrupt, but that doesn't matter because the definition of corrupt can't exist because notions of better and worse are oppression. So they've just fully gone on completely incoherent mode. And this is where sadly, millions of people find themselves who have been tricked and exploited by the left because their options are to go along with the blatant attacks on sanity, the endorsements for utter degeneracy, women whoring themselves, saying the opposite of the truth, endorsing criminals, endorsing crime, hating capitalism, hating civilization, saying there should be less people. The list goes on infinitely. And giving up their cult membership card, which also means relinquishing their counterfeit good person status and in a sense becoming homeless because they've spent so much time demonizing the opposite side, which for so long has engaged with the antithesis of the left-wing ideology: freedom, meritocracy, reason, rationality, free speech. That would naturally be where anyone resides who rejects the cult-like left, but they're afraid and they've been broken for a long time. The attacks on their psyches have been happening for years, and over the years of 2020, 2021, and 2022, many psyches were broken as they were forced to say 2 + 2 = 17. The government is on my side. People who criticize the government are crazy. They've been practiced in lying. And being practiced in lying is feminine because being too afraid to stand up for truth is feminine. By definition, standing up against all odds and saying what's true despite the consequences is masculine. That is every hero archetype since the beginning of time. That's every movie hero archetype. That's why Trump's movement was inherently masculine. That's why it was ultimately competent men battling against pure, evil, degenerate, feminine chaos. And also why, by the way, we'll be able to build a civilization afterwards because we can forgive broken, degenerate women for being broken and degenerate, as masculinity is always required to do after it saves women from themselves. But the requirement to deny reality by the left is now out in the open, making this battle very interesting because it's as if the evil team is wearing jerseys saying I'm evil, except they all don't care because they say there's no such thing as right and wrong. This video of a woman basically like leaving her husband of 10 years is just one example of that. They think, this is totally fine because masculine standards are oppression. Another example here where they expect you to go along with blatant mind attacks against the population, claiming Biden is more sharp than he's ever been, straight out of North Korea. Propaganda that is equivalent, if not more radical than that which they play in North Korea. Because at least in North Korea, when they praise their leader, they're talking about things their leader actually did for the most part. They're like, look, Kim Jong-un is riding a horse. And in reality, Kim Jong-un actually was riding a horse. But here, they're just like, Biden can think just equivalently to Stephen Hawking. Meanwhile, Biden hasn't been seen for weeks, and last thing we saw was him getting confused about which direction to walk. And they're still like, he's equivalent to Stephen Hawking. It's a much more demeaning, much more offensive attack on people's psyches. But this is how the left exists. Another example would be New York refusing to hold in detention an illegal immigrant who burned a woman alive on the subway because that would be enforcing borders, parameters, and coherent frameworks. You have no idea how deeply their resentment goes. The transcending of degenerate femininity is crucial in the total refutation of left-wing ideologies and presuppositional axioms. Because as we learn to transcend the counterfeit feminine victimhood claims, their ideology of counterfeit victimhood and good person status loses its power. And in that happening, all the frauds are simultaneously held accountable permanently. Another important thing to keep in mind is we also win, so we have many win conditions, to use a StarCraft term or a chess term. We also win when all these women who hate reality masculinity and have dedicated their lives to degeneracy and the resentment of coherent masculine heroes don't reproduce. There's also no coming back from that because all the women that are feminine don't resent masculine heroes, don't resent order, don't resent laws, don't resent coherence and nature itself. They do have children and they do reproduce and they do have many kids. So while the people that advocate for depopulation don't reproduce and those who advocate for population increase do reproduce, those who advocate for population increase inherit the earth and the degenerates don't. This is a very interesting time because, again, the world has never seen such a mass movement of women being utterly destroyed and obliterated. There is a silent warfare going on against femininity being done by exploiting it and telling women that every aspect of coherence and objective reality is unredeemable corruption, and that they are heroes as a result of doing degeneracy and being degenerate, being pathetic, and hating competent men. By the year 2030, 50% of women will be single and childless, a record high number for women since the beginning of time. It's never have we seen 50% of women being single and childless before, and that's just 5 years away given current trends. Not enough people are talking about this war on femininity. And even though the destroyed, wrecked psyches that can't stand what I'm doing here because I'm talking about truth in coherent ways, using logic, reason, rationality, and coherent authority, I am actually serving women by speaking the truth and exposing this evil that's destroying them. But it's very in keeping with Marxist resentment, the spirit of Cain, and leftist resentment for that matter, to despise truth saving them and saving their world because they would rather watch everything crumble around them and match their wretched state, mirror their wretched state in a sense. So I appreciate all of you watching. This channel is demonetized because we speak too much truth. Hopefully that changes as Trump comes into office. I would appreciate it if you go to the link in description, abrahambier.locals.com, and become a member for less than the price of a coffee. It helps sustain this fight, and I'll see you guys in the next video.